There are places that seem like they'll stay peaceful forever, where the water lies still like glass, the porch smells of old timber, and mornings begin with the whisper of the wind. But then, one day, you realize someone is standing at the edge of your lake, wearing a polo shirt with a strange logo, holding a clipboard and telling you you're no longer allowed to dock your own boat there. The reason? It doesn't match the community aesthetic. You think it's a joke, then you see the ropes and the barge and a woman with a walkie-talkie barking orders like she's seizing national property. What they don't realize is what they're trying to take isn't just a boat. It's a lake, a piece of freedom, and unfortunately for them, that lake belongs to me. I woke up on a Saturday morning like I always do. A mug of black coffee, worn-out slippers, and the quiet sound of waves lapping against the lake's edge. But instead of peace, what I saw was my pontoon boat being hauled away in broad daylight. I froze on my porch, barefoot on the weathered wood, still half asleep, coffee in hand. At the shoreline, a short guy in a polo shirt with the HOA logo was yelling, "We warned you!" My boat, a 26-foot beige pontoon I'd cared for over 5 years, was being dragged off like it was FBI evidence. The tow line screeched, and another guy strained to coil the rope onto a barge. I almost laughed. They were acting like they were raiding a crime lord. What they didn't know, I don't just own the boat. I own the lake, the entire lake. Not a section, not shoreline access, not docking rights, the entire body of water. Surface rights, lake bed, fishing access, ingress and egress, all in my name. What they were doing wasn't enforcement. It was trespassing, theft, and unlawful interference with private property. I took a sip of coffee, set the mug on the porch railing, and muttered, "Well, this just got interesting. It all started a few days earlier with what seemed harmless. A crumpled white envelope stuffed under my door, not mailed. No recipient name, just a choking perfume stench, the kind of scent you only get when someone empties a bottle of passive aggression number 5 on stationery. I opened it. Notice of violation. Your boat does not comply with the community aesthetic standards and must be removed within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in further action. Signed with a scribbled flourish by Cheryl Linford, HOA President, underlined twice like she was the law incarnate. I chuckled, because I knew something Cheryl clearly didn't. The lake was not under HOA jurisdiction. I'd bought it years ago from a bankrupt golf course for pennies, a hidden gem nobody had cared to notice back then. The next morning, as I was fiddling with my smoker in the backyard, Cheryl Linford showed up. Neon windbreaker, clipboard in hand, oversized sunglasses, looking like a self-appointed style cop hunting down visual crimes. "You got the letter, right?" her voice screeched. "I did," I replied, wrench still in hand. "There must be a mistake. The boat's outside HOA boundaries." "You're wrong," Cheryl snapped. "The lake is a community amenity. We have the right to maintain visual consistency." "Excuse me? Your boat is an eyesore," she said flatly. "Beige is not an HOA-approved color. It disrupts the view from my yoga deck." "Ah, so that was it." I'd heard rumors Cheryl had a personal yoga platform out back and yelled at squirrels every morning while deep breathing into the sunrise. I took a breath and stayed calm. "I own the lake," I said evenly. "Not just the shore. The whole lake. I have the deed." Cheryl scoffed like I'd just told her I was Emperor of the Moon. "So how are you going to feel when your boat's towed?" she challenged, waving her clipboard like it was a magic wand. I didn't answer. I just shrugged and squinted at the sunlight dancing on the lake. "Go ahead," I said. "I'll be waiting." I thought she was bluffing. Surely no one was crazy. Enough to tow someone's boat, especially off a lake they didn't control. But I underestimated Cheryl. Ever since she became president, the HOA had morphed into a semi-military unit, forming its own security patrol, handing out fines for mismatched flower pots, even citing dogs for excessive enthusiasm during BBQ hours. And this morning, As I stood there watching them drag my boat away, I knew one thing for sure. The war had begun. They had dragged my boat maybe 10 feet before I spoke. "Stop," I said, voice calm as granite. "What you're doing is illegal. Theft of property, unlawful trespass, and interference with private land rights." The guy in the HOA logo polo turned and squinted at me like I'd just cursed him in Latin. "We're acting under the authority of the Residents' Council," he replied, serious as a junior defense officer on his first day. I nodded. "Good, because you're going to need a lawyer, maybe two." Behind them, Cheryl stood at the dock, walkie-talkie in hand, smug expression plastered across her face like she was coordinating an international raid. "Don't be ridiculous," she shouted. "Nobody owns an entire lake." I didn't respond. I turned, walked back inside, opened my safe, pulled out the thick navy blue legal folder, and returned like a judge carrying a verdict. The breeze caught a few pages as I stepped onto the dock, but that was fine. These weren't flyers. They were the full legal ownership documents for Lake Lenora, signed, stamped, and filed at the County Land Records Office. Water rights, fishing rights, docking rights, even dry season water level control, all mine. Held the documents up for all of them to see. I bought this lake 5 years ago when the golf course went bankrupt. The entire lake, including the spot you're standing on, is private property. Mine. One of the two boat-hauling guys, the one who seemed to still have some brain cells, stepped forward, took the folder, and scanned the pages. He swallowed hard. "Miss Cheryl," he said quietly, "this says he really does own the whole lake." Cheryl snatched the folder like it was a leaked Pentagon file, flipped through it, then tossed it back at me like she was serving divorce papers. "Doesn't matter. The HOA has priority under internal bylaws." I cut her off, my eyes steady. "HOA bylaws don't override county-level property law, and if you'd like, I can have the sheriff here in 15 minutes. I didn't have to say anything else. Cheryl paled. She gave a signal, and the two guys began untying the ropes, fumbling like teenagers caught sneaking out of school. The boat drifted gently back to the dock like nothing had happened, the tow line splashing into the water with a plop, more satisfying than a country song chorus. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat. I just stood there, legal file in hand, coffee, cold in the mug, and watched them retreat. No anger, no retaliation, just awe. Awe at the confident stupidity of people who believed a clipboard and a polo shirt could bend the law to their will. I thought that was the end of it. I figured, after being so publicly embarrassed, Cheryl would back off. But no. That afternoon, I walked out to get the mail and found a bright orange sticker slapped on my mailbox. Warning, non-compliant structure. Pending sanction. The next morning, another notice appeared, taped to the curb next to my house. Number. I could smell the pettiness in the air. But the last straw? I found a HOA violation sticker, slapped onto a duck. Yes, a duck. A confused mallard standing next to my boat. Cheryl wasn't just going after legal gray areas, she'd declared war on the ecosystem. That's when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was war. And I wasn't going to fight it alone. That night, I called Ellie, a retired Coast Guard commander who once salvaged ghost ships in the Gulf. Now she runs a fishing charter on the lake and drinks beer like Liberty is brewed. Into every can, I told her everything. She nearly choked on her beer when I got to the part about the duck citation. "Good Lord," Ellie said. "They tried to tow your boat? On your own lake? Are they out of their damn minds?" "Absolutely." She nodded, raised her beer like a Roman soldier raising a shield. "It's time," Ellie said. "We rally the troops." I didn't know what troops meant exactly, but I knew one thing for sure. Karen 2.0, a.k.a. Cheryl, just picked a fight she couldn't win. The next morning, I was brushing my teeth and casually looking out the window. then nearly spat toothpaste all over the glass. A flat barge was slowly drifting toward my boat, bobbing on the water like a beached whale. On it were two guys in reflective vests, armed with measuring tape and clipboards like they were planning to install a mini-golf course in the middle of the lake, and standing on the shore, Cheryl. This time in a blinding orange vest that read in giant block letters, Lakefront Enforcement Officer. She looked like she was about to lead the Normandy landing, minus the helmet and artillery. I stepped out onto the deck, toothbrush still in hand, and yelled, "What's the circus this time?" Cheryl, sounding like she'd just walked out of a courtroom. "You continue to violate the Community Lake Beautification Initiative. All unauthorized vessels are being documented for removal." "Meaning, which boats exactly?" I asked. "All boats that fail to meet standards of color, shape, and placement," she declared. I nearly laughed out loud. The two workers on the barge clearly hadn't been told they were enforcing a fashion code. They looked at me, then at Cheryl, with the wide-eyed confusion of men wondering, "Where the hell are we?" I went inside, grabbed my camera, returned to the deck, and started snapping photos. I made sure to capture Cheryl in her caution orange vest looking like a railroad crossing guard, the two dazed workers wondering how they got drafted into this nonsense, and my beige beauty of a boat, calmly docked in the middle of a manufactured crisis. If Cheryl wanted a show, I'd give her the full circus. Lions, fire breathers, and a clown falling into the water included. That afternoon, I called Ellie. "Rally the team," I said. "It's time to strike back." Not long after, Ellie showed up, with beer, of course, and also Raj and Linda. Raj, a hydrology professor from the State University, looked like a gentle monk, but had a brain sharp enough to slice steel. He came armed with a laptop, hydrographic maps from the 80s, and a water usage charter printed on translucent blueprint paper. Linda, a former real estate attorney who once worked for an HOA until she almost had to sue her own boss for fining children for sidewalk chalk art. She arrived with sunglasses the size of satellite dishes and a Bluetooth headset glued to her ear like she was negotiating to buy Walmart. We gathered at my kitchen table. Beers cracked open, documents spread everywhere. Raj circled water access boundaries with a pencil, pointing out every detail the HOA legally couldn't touch: easements, riparian buffers, flow management rights. Linda confirmed Cheryl's not just out of bounds. She's exposed to legal action for abuse of authority, trespassing, and falsifying administrative intent. Ellie clapped me on the back. "We've got more than law on our side. We've got reason, and in the HOA battlefield, that's heavy artillery." Just then, a buzzing noise came from above. We all looked up. A drone, big and bold, was circling over my boat, zooming in on the sail, the beer cooler, even my old folding chair I use for fishing. Across the lake, Cheryl was holding her phone, up grinning like she was piloting a NASA spy satellite. "Surveillance?" Ellie muttered. Linda said nothing. She walked to her car, opened the trunk, pulled out a long metal tube resembling a pressure washer lance, attached a nozzle head, and returned to the deck. Without a word, she aimed, adjusted the pressure, and pshh, a high-powered water blast hit the drone dead on. Thwack! The drone spun like a drunk pigeon and splashed into the lake with a satisfying plop. From across the shore, Cheryl shrieked, "That's destruction of federal property." Linda smiled coolly. "Then report it, and I'll report you for aerial invasion of private airspace." Cheryl frozen. She stood there like a wall that just got tagged with graffiti. Then she turned on her heel and walked away without another word. I looked at Raj, then Ellie, then Linda. We all knew. Cheryl wasn't done. She'd be back, bolder, more reckless. But this time, we were ready. We had a team. We had the law. We had a strategy, and one thing Cheryl would never have: the truth. I thought that after the drone took a dive like a confused pigeon and Cheryl's clipboard squad got hosed off the battlefield, things would calm down. I was wrong. The next morning, I got an email with a subject line the size of a billboard. Emergency. Vote Lake Management Ordinance. The body of the message? Bureaucratic gibberish stuffed with phrases like aesthetic cohesion, protecting property values, and addressing unauthorized floating entities. Translation? They wanted to boot me and my beige boat off the lake, again. The proposed HOA ordinance was 4 pages long, no docking within 50 feet of the shoreline, no floating structures unless pre-approved. And best of all watercraft must conform to the community's natural color palette. The funniest twist? I wasn't allowed to vote because I wasn't a member of the HOA. Yet somehow, they wanted those rules to apply to my lake. Didn't wait until Friday to clap back. They wanted a community meeting? I'd turn it into a blockbuster premiere. On the day of the vote, I showed up in khakis and a freshly pressed white shirt, lake ownership documents tucked neatly under, my arm like a lawyer about to win a case. Ellie waited on the porch with Raj and Linda. Linda even brought popcorn. She grinned. I like to snack when Cheryl, blows up. We walked into the clubhouse meeting room and found Cheryl already at the podium, pointing dramatically at a projector screen showing a distorted, zoomed-in photo of my boat, stretched out like a criminal mugshot. Across it, in bold letters, the aesthetic threat to the lake. Cheryl waved her arms and hissed, "If we don't act, we'll soon see things like houseboats, jet skis, neon party pontoons. This is a slippery slope." An old man timidly raised his hand. I thought, we don't actually own the lake? The whole room went silent. Cheryl forced a smile. We have a spiritual responsibility to preserve harmony. That's when I stepped forward. I didn't say a word at first. I simply opened my folder and pulled out a large format photocopy, the official deed to Lake Lenora, complete with parcel ID highlighted in yellow. I held it high, slowly turning so the entire room could see. You may not own the lake. But I do. And every rule you're about to vote on doesn't apply to me. The room fell so quiet you could hear someone blink. A few people coughed. Others flipped through their papers. A confused elderly woman turned to her husband and whispered, "Wait, who is he again?" Cheryl stammered. "You can't just barge in here and threaten." I cut her off. "I'm not threatening, I'm informed, and if needed, my attorney can start working in the next 24 hours. Linda, still munching popcorn, calmly pulled out a folder. "Here's a draft of the lawsuit ready to file. Includes falsified, violation notices, unauthorized surveillance, willful interference with private property." The whole room seemed to melt in slow silence. A man near the door leaned over and whispered to his friend. "We printed flyers and didn't even—" "Know the guy owns the lake?" Cheryl stood frozen like a wax figure. I turned and walked out of the room without saying another word. The truth had done its job. But I knew Cheryl wouldn't stop there. She wasn't the type to retreat gracefully. She'd do something stupid, and I was ready for it. I thought that after my "I own the lake" mic drop in the meeting room, Cheryl would retreat to her cave and hibernate. But no. Not only did she not back down, she doubled down with some HOA-grade playground tactics. 2 days after the meeting, a trifold A4 sheet showed up in my mailbox. No envelope, no stamp, just a blurry HOA logo and the kind of fake-looking red stamp you'd find on a toy cash register. I opened it. A violation notice, this time claiming my lake access permit was denied. A photo of my boat, likely taken during the drone incident, was slapped with a giant red X, and the message, "Your vessel is not licensed for lake access. Cease operations immediately." At the bottom, a squiggly signature and a self-appointed title issued by HOA Lake Authority. Linda nearly choked on her tea when she saw the document. Raj didn't even need to read it. He ran it through a verification system he built during COVID lockdown. "This is going to be fun," Raj said, pointing to the bottom right corner of the paper. "What?" I asked. "It still has the Canva watermark." That's when I decided it was time for the real counterattack, not with megaphones, not with protest signs, but with the one thing HOAs fear most, the law. We began building our case. Raj compiled all the evidence, maps, water rights, footage of unauthorized intrusions. Linda drafted the legal documents, charges of forgery, property threats, HOA power, abuse. Ellie submitted a video of the barge and the falling drone. And me? I printed out every violation sticker I'd received, including the one slapped on the duck. But before filing the lawsuit, I wanted to play a quieter card, one that reminded the HOA that this lake wasn't Cheryl's backyard. I organized a little event, nothing fancy. I called it Lake Night, freedom, music, and no permits needed. No flyers, no announcements. Just a few wooden signs around the lake, handwritten, tonight at 7, food, live music, and lights. Host, the guy who owns the lake. Ellie showed up with a mini band. Raj hung a sheet for projecting family movies. Linda brought whiskey, naturally. Families rolled in. Kids played near the shore. Retirees pulled up in golf carts just to enjoy the acoustic set. Even a few who had voted with the HOA quietly appeared, holding plastic cups and avoiding eye contact. And of course, Cheryl made a call. 2 HOA volunteers came jogging into the middle of the gathering, wearing vests that read, Community. Order Patrol, yelling, "You're violating Regulation 14B, Community Quiet Hours!" Linda took a sip of whiskey, stepped forward, and handed them a folder. List of HOA complaints dismissed by the court, plus a letter from the city confirming the lake is not under HOA jurisdiction. They took the documents, shut their mouths, and slowly turned around, like kids caught stealing candy. Toward the end of the evening, a man I'd never met shook my hand and said, "We've lived here 10 years. This is the first time the lake's felt alive. Thank you for reminding us this lake is for loving, not controlling." I didn't reply. Just looked out at the lake, glowing under porch lights, filled with children's laughter, and the smell of BBQ drifting on the breeze. And I knew. Cheryl had lost. Not by force, not by vote. She made herself the punchline. But I still wasn't done. The following Monday, Linda and I visited the county office. The lawsuit package was printed, sorted, and stamped. We filed official charges for threatening, personal property, forging administrative documents, exercising unauthorized authority, trespassing on private lake property. 2 days later, I was sipping coffee on my porch when I saw a man in a suit knocking on Cheryl's door. Not a neighbor. Not an HOA rep.a process server. I saw Cheryl open the door, her annoyed expression turning pale as paper. She flipped through the pages, then looked around hoping no one had noticed. Too bad. I saw everything, and that morning coffee, best I'd had in years. I thought that after getting served by the court, Cheryl would retreat to the shadows, reflect on her sins, maybe even plant a tree and do some karmic yoga. But no. That Saturday morning, I was just brewing coffee when I heard frantic knocking. At the door, it was Greg, my neighbor next door, hair sticking up like he'd been electrocuted. "Jake, you need to come outside. Cheryl just put something up. You have to see it." I stepped out, coffee still hot in hand. And there it was. Giant wooden sign hammered into the lakefront. In bold red letters, warning, unauthorized boats will be removed, enforced by HOA Lake Patrol. And beneath it, a row of cheap plastic buoys, strung together with nylon rope, stretched across a section of the lake. A DIY checkpoint straight out of a summer camp. I stared at it for a full 60 seconds. Said nothing. Did nothing. Then I burst out, laughing so hard I nearly spilled coffee on my flip-flops. Cheryl honestly thought a few orange floaties and a kitty-sized anchor that hadn't even touched bottom could stop. Me? This was my lake, and I was standing on my property, which she'd just trespassed on to install her sign. Linda nearly cried from laughing when I sent the photo to our group chat. Raj showed up in under 10 minutes with his GPS gear and immediately began mapping out every buoy's location, dimensions, and coordinates for the case file. And Ellie? She paddled out into the lake on her board with a giant black pirate flag, skull and crossbones, planted it right in the middle of the buoy line. "This zone is now declared free waters," she yelled, "protected by the retired Navy." That night, I called up a few friends with boats and jet skis. We hosted something called Freedom Float Fest, the unpermitted cruise. The lake shimmered with lights. Music played softly. A kid sat on a pink flamingo float being gently towed across the water like a VIP in a music video, and that cheap nylon rope barrier? It snapped halfway through the evening. A couple waves and it washed ashore like a broken shoelace. Cheryl watched. From her backyard, sunglasses on, arms folded like a statue of lady disapproval. I waved. She didn't wave back. But my message couldn't have been clearer. This was a battle she was never equipped to win. Then something magical happened. A local journalist, after seeing Dabur Pontoon Gate trending online, showed up asking for an interview. We sat on the deck of my boat. I told him everything. Legal documents, the shady tactics, the drone crash, and even the Canva violation notice. 2 days later, the article dropped with the headline, "Lake Owner versus HOA. When a pontoon boat sinks a faux empire." The internet exploded. Comments poured in. People sharing their own stories, laughing till they cried, cursing their own HOAs like I had become the face of a national uprising. And just like that, logic kicked in. 3 HOA board members resigned. That same week, an emergency meeting was called, not to protect the lake's aesthetic, but to rebuild community trust. Cheryl? She didn't show. Rumor had it she was meeting with her lawyer. Personally, I figured she was busy untangling nylon rope from the weeds in her backyard. But here came the final blow. While Raj was reviewing maps for our case file, he noticed something interesting. Cheryl's backyard extended 10 feet into the lake property. Her koi pond, complete with lighting, stone lining, and a wisteria-covered fence, sat squarely on land belonging to Lake Lenora. In other words, on my land. I had 3 options: file a lawsuit, force full removal, or send a property encroachment notice. I chose option 3, with a twist: remove the koi pond and pay a small fine, or sign an annual lease agreement at a fee of my choosing. Cheryl responded with a shaky, handwritten letter, claiming the pond predated my ownership. Didn't matter anymore. Because the next morning I stepped out onto my porch and saw a landscaping crew draining the koi pond, running surveyor lines, and hammering red boundary stakes across Cheryl's backyard. She stood there, face purple, eyes avoiding mine. I didn't have to say a word. That scene said everything. After watching Cheryl stand by as her koi pond was drained like a seafood tank at a street market, I thought it was over. But then the strangest thing happened. She went silent. No emails, no Canva-printed citations. No one saw her outside again. It was like the HOA dragon had suddenly turned into a stray cat evicted from its own kingdom. I didn't celebrate too quickly, because silence in HOA politics is never the end. It's usually the moment they're preparing to rise again under a new name. So I gathered a group of residents, people who no longer trusted the HOA but didn't yet know what to do next. We sat down together. No formal meetings, no whiteboards, no clipboards, just neighbors being neighbors, and I proposed an independent lake committee, not tied to the HOA, no fines, just a volunteer group to keep the lake clean, beautiful, and free. The response? Overwhelming. In the first week, more than 30 people signed up. Ellie volunteered to lead weekend cleanup crews. Raj installed a cheap DIY water quality testing station. Linda drafted a charter, a single A4 page, simple, clear, and loophole-proof. No reflective vests, No walkie-talkies, just people, and the lake. We set up a simple digital bulletin board where residents could post sunset photos, report floating, debris, and ask for help pulling boats ashore after storms. It felt, for the first time in years, like neighbors were neighbors again. No one said it out loud, but I knew. They saw what happens when power falls into the wrong hands. But of course, Cheryl had to leave behind one final legacy. One drizzly afternoon, I found a plain white envelope. No logo, no return address, just my name written in slanted blue ink, sealed with a cheap, glittery gold sticker that looked like it belonged on a candy wrapper. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded in fourths, handwritten. I hope you're satisfied. You proved your point. No apology, no admission of guilt, just a line, as if I'd vandalized her masterpiece. I wasn't angry, not even surprised. I simply walked down to the dock, stuffed the letter into an empty glass bottle, and tossed it into the lake. I watched it drift away, just like everything Cheryl ever put up, her threats, her warning signs, her nylon float barriers, now drifting into oblivion. Then a few days later, a little boy on a bike rode by, holding the same bottle, soaked. "Mister," he said, "this floated up to my dock. I thought you might need it back." I looked at the bottle, the ink inside now smudged beyond recognition, but I understood the message. Not from Cheryl, but from the lake. Even the lake didn't want to keep her words. I smiled, and this time, I threw it far. So far it disappeared, into the forested edge across the water. I thought the story had ended, until one spring morning, I got a call from the county planning office. A polite voice on the line asked, "Are you Jake, the owner of Lake Lenora? We're reviewing several HOA-related abuse complaints. Would you be willing to serve on an advisory panel for resident rights?" I nearly laughed out loud. "Me? The guy who got cited for a duck?" He chuckled. "Exactly. That's why we want to hear from you." I agreed, not for prestige, but because I know there are hundreds, maybe thousands, out there still being threatened by their own local Cheryl over paint shades and improperly sized flower beds. That night, I hosted a lake rebirth gathering. No drones, no flash, no fines. Just one grill, a few good friends, and the biodegradable lanterns Raj brought, floating gently into the night with our wishes. One lantern drifted farther than all the rest, its tiny flame gliding past my boat in silence. I didn't know what the wish on it said, but I like to think it read, "Let this place stay just like this." And it did. After the lake rebirth gathering, I noticed something. No one whispered about Cheryl anymore. No hastily printed citations. No 3 a.m. HOA emails with subject lines like "Urgent, Unapproved, Color Alert." No more night patrols with high-powered flashlights like they were scanning for UFOs. Just the lake, still, clean, and belonging to everyone. I started waking up earlier, not to be on guard, but to enjoy it. That morning, as I stepped onto the porch, I saw kids fishing off the dock, an old man kayaking like it was still the 70s, a couple snapping photos of the sunrise hand in hand, and my pontoon boat. It had become a symbol, not of victory, but of justified resistance. A reminder that not everyone holding a clipboard is automatically right. Since the lake had come back, I began receiving things I never expected. An elderly lady baked me an apple pie with a handwritten note. "Sorry I once believed her. Thank you for standing firm." A kid taped a drawing to my boat, a cartoon pontoon with a big grin captioned, "Captain Jake saves the lake." I framed that drawing and hung it right next to my official lake deed. I didn't need gratitude, but I admit it made me feel it was worth it. Not because I won, but because the community woke up. We were no longer just rows of houses competing over Christmas lights. We became people, real people, who understood right from wrong. I haven't forgotten Cheryl. I haven't forgotten how power misplaced can become a weapon, and I know someday a new Cheryl will show up. Different name, different title, different clipboards. So I got ahead of it. Alongside level-headed residents, we drafted our own community charter. No fines, no binding clauses, no committees that could override the people. Just one core sentence: no. One may represent the community unless chosen by the community. Ellie still leads lake cleanups every weekend. Raj installed a digital sensor to monitor lake levels and ecosystem health, a safeguard against fake environmental reports. Linda started a mini-class called Land Law 101 for newcomers. She jokingly calls it Surviving the HOA. One day I stood on the boat deck, looking out over the water, breezy, rippling, drenched in honey-colored evening light. No sirens. No one yelling through bullhorns, just the sound of children laughing, a guitar strumming from Ellie's yard, and the soft hum of peace. I thought to myself, they didn't just try to take my boat. They tried to take the quiet, the privacy, the soul of this place. And I didn't let them. I didn't shout. I didn't swing fists. I stood with truth, with paperwork, with resolve. As the sun dipped low, I noticed the last lantern from Lake Rebirth still drifting, its little candle flickering. I didn't know what wish was written on it, but I guessed it read, "May this lake never be fooled." Again. And it hasn't. This peace wasn't luck. It was reclaimed by someone who'd been threatened, humiliated, and reminded that truth, when it stands firm, can melt any counterfeit power. It wasn't just a boat. It was how a community was reclaimed. This battle started with a violation sticker. It escalated with drones, barges, and meaningless warning signs. But it ended with evidence, with resolve, with truth. I didn't need to raise my voice. All I needed was a proper boundary map, a few friends who understood the law, and a community willing to wake up. And what I got in return wasn't just the quiet of the lake. It was trust from my neighbors, evening laughter, and the feeling that we weren't victims anymore. Karen might disappear, but the lesson stays. Not everyone in a reflective vest, holding a clipboard and shouting regulations is right. And silence doesn't always mean consent. Some things you have to stand up for, not because they're easy to lose, but because if you do lose them, you've lost the very thing you call home.